Welcome back, Day Camp friends, to episode 14 of the Day Camp Pod. I am Andy Pritikin, the director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake, Illinois, northwest of Chicago.
And I'm Aaron Gluckstein from Camp Robin Hood, located in Toronto, Canada.
And we are Day Camp professionals joining forces to provide a forum for camp pros like you to share ideas and best practices across North America and beyond. And for today's episode, we're going to be talking with Kim Aycock and Dr. G, Deb Gilboa, for our part 2 of our staffing podcast, focusing this time on keeping staff on board from the interview through the first day of camp. And I've got to tell you that the Day Camp podcast is brought to you by the CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, fine purveyors of the best waterfront and splash pad products in the world. Check them out at their website, crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun. And this Go Camp Pro podcast is also sponsored in part by the American Camp Association, New York and New Jersey, dedicated to preserving, promoting, and enhancing the quality of the summer camp experience. Their professional development includes the Tri-State Camp Conference, as well as many other professional development opportunities that can be found at aca-nynj.org. All right. So first of all, I have to tell the people who can't see us right now that Sam is, are you still at Mid-States? Is that where you are?
Yes.
All right. And she's holed up in the corner of the atrium in the hallway right now. So with a phone to her head, it is so adorable looking. And she just became a grandma. So I want to give a shout out to Sam, the cool, youthful grandma, right? And Kim Aycock had her birthday 2 days ago on April Fool's Day, an awesome birthday, which she told us that they celebrated Michael Brandwine, got everybody singing the birthday song to her. So that's awesomely campy. And Dr. G is probably between patients and picking up her kids, right? Am I right about that?
That is often how it goes. Absolutely.
All right. So my 2 cents to start off this podcast is that for years as a camp professional, I would talk to my sleepaway camp brethren, and they would tell me the horror stories of how they hire all these staff during the year, and then on the first day of staff orientation, they would just pray that the majority of them would show up. And and I always was just like, well, that sort of makes sense if you're asking people from the other side of the country to make their way all the way up to the mountains of the Catskills or whatever. But for a day camp, we never really had those problems. We're embedded in our communities. We know the people that we're dealing with, or we know the person that knows the person, or that kind of thing. And a lot of established places like my own, over half of my staff are former campers at this point. Now we're approaching my 18th year. So you think it wouldn't happen so badly to us. And then something changed. And like, I don't know, 5 years ago or whatever, people like Kim Aycock started getting phone calls and saying, Kim, we got a crisis. We got an issue here. And big camps like mine started experiencing 20, 30, I think it was over 35 last year, staff who, were signed, sealed, and delivered as far as we were concerned, many of which even went through staff orientation. And then let's say, at some point during that time, a month or two before, all the way up to the first day, decided that there was better opportunities elsewhere, or they couldn't do it because of whatever reason, or an internship popped up. And I literally in the last couple of years, have gotten emails from staff on the Friday before the first day of camp. And one time from a guy who had been a camper with me since he was 5 years old. And I know his whole family. And I just couldn't believe it. And from a parent's perspective, and I'm 52, so that's my age range of thinking. Like, my parents would never let me break that kind of commitment, like not in a million years. But it seems like the YOLO aspect of, you got to get yours, no one's going to look out for you except you kind of thing. That's this pervasive thinking that's being sent down from the parents to the kids. So, but, Kim has been speaking about this at conferences and through her writings with ACA and trainings, and she's really, really hot on this subject. And we're part of a group of an ACA committee called Camp's a Real Job, which sort of focuses a little bit on this kind of thing too, and how to get people to understand that this is a real job and not just some kind of like volunteer thing that you can sort of bail out on. So I want to hand it off to Kim first. And I just, to start off, you know, how can we set the stage, starting like when we first meet these people at interviews? You know, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, so one of the things we've learned, and so Deb Jordan and I have done a couple of panels with students, and what we've asked them point blank, tell us why it is, what this whole phenomenon of ghosting is all about. And the students have told us, they said, well, you know, we just have so many offers today. There's so many options out there that if we don't feel connected or engaged to a particular job or whatever that may be, whatever that may look like, they're like, we're just going to go. We're not going to stick around to continue the process and maybe, you know, just not show up at all. So, and then the other thing that's really interesting that we found out is that sometimes college age students will take more than one job. They will actually say yes to more than one, just to sort of have their backup plan. And my colleague Deb Jordan has asked her students about this, and she said, well, what is it that you're worried about? Why do you think you need to have more than one job? And one of the responses is they think they're not going to, you know, cut the background check or something. And she says, well, do you have anything to be worried about? And they say, well, no, not really. I don't think so. But they just don't get it, I guess. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and we've learned in our conversations, is just that we really have to sell camp as the best offer. And so how do we do that when they have so many different opportunities, when they could take those internships, or they could do, you know, online school, or taking classes to catch up or to get ahead, those kinds of things. And so we really have to think about, how can we make camp the best offer? And one of the things that I would consider in that thought process is that we're asking our potential staff to make a commitment to us, right? And so they're signing on the dotted line. But are we also telling them what commitment it is that we're making to them? So letting them know, because some of them may have never done camp before. I think we talked about that last time. It's like 5 and 6 people have not been to camp. And so how do we do that if they don't have that context, or that sort of in their wheelhouse? And so I think really, letting them know that, hey, we don't expect you to know everything when you get there. That's what staff training is all about. We're going to teach you what it is that you need to know. And if you just like working with people, if you're willing to you know, sort of put yourself out there and try something new, then you've got the right kind of attitude that it takes to be at camp.
All right, let me interject for a second.
Yeah.
One thing that you touched on is their options. Like you say, they have more options than ever before. And that sounds like a cliche sort of thing to say, but it is so true, because, you know, we've learned that this generation, Gen Z, right, that's out there, is actually one of the smallest generations of all time, right? And because of that, you know, from our perspective, there's less fish in the pond. So therefore there's more opportunities for them. In essence, it's a buyer's market for them.
And Andy, if I can just say,
please.
I think that it's important to think, Kim, what you're talking about, their context is that they are all from a younger and younger age, freshmen, sophomores, thinking about college. And college, the name of the game is apply as many places as you can, have backups, have options. And so they're in that mindset of sounding very interested and very connected and very engaged with more than one place, because they think when it comes to it, who knows if I'll get in anywhere. And I wonder if that's maybe as much as the background check, if that's their fear of, like, maybe just when push comes to shove, I will only have one option. So I'm going to, you know, who knows what'll come along, who will be better, what I'm competing with. So some of it is just the scarcity mindset that they have from applying to college that I think impacts their wanting to hold more than one place at the same time.
Well, can you talk about the scarcity mindset a little bit? I think that's really, really relevant, because these kids have grown up in an age where they're seeing adults losing their jobs, right? They're seeing a lack of, they're seeing scarcity, right?
They're seeing scarcity and uncertainty that, from whether or not they verbalize it to themselves or their parents may verbalize, you know, well, sure, but maybe that camp won't exist by summer because someone will get caught up in the Me Too movement, or maybe we won't want you to go there because there'll be some horrible weather thing that's happening there. I mean, they are just living in a shifting sands under your feet time that no other generation has, I think.
Yeah.
And I also think they also have their, just even in their social life, they wait to see sort of what's going to be their best offer
For Saturday night, let alone the whole summer.
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And so they don't, so committing to something on Monday, but then if something better shows up by, Friday or Saturday, they're going to go with the better thing, right? And not necessarily tell the people that they committed to on Monday that's where they're
And Andy,
headed.
I think we're going to talk about your question, which was how are parents letting or even encouraging that? And I think I can speak to that a little bit because that's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. Go ahead, Ehren.
Sorry, let me just jump in. Something that again along the point that Andy made, and related to parents, something that we're seeing is that the choice of options that the kids, that the young adults have, is also dependent on whether the parents think that the job at camp is the best option for them. And sometimes we'll have a staff member that commits to the job, and then the parents is the one following up with us saying, you know what, this is not what my son's doing this summer. He had a hard year. First year at away from home. He needs to spend the summer resting and doing some things around the house. That's been a more common problem for us as well.
Yeah. So you're selling camp not only to the young person, but to the adult too, in a way. You have to make it clear.
Not just in a way.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. All right. So just forging forward, Kim, in regards to creating a sense of community, you sort of touched on that, and creating a sense of community in the off season, and going back to how I used to be so happy I was at day camp compared to resident camps. Now I think that we need to steal some of their ideas and how to keep a virtual community, right? Because even though these people live in our neighborhoods, it's not like they're outside playing in the neighborhoods. Everybody's in their own little, bubble staring at their screens anyway in the off season, or they're away at college and such like that too. So, trying to figure out how to keep a sense of community in the off season. So for the returning people, trying to keep it like, 12 months a year kind of thing. And then for the people that sign on, let's say in February or March, right? How to keep them somewhat engaged, so it's not just this big black hole that they're stepping into on the first day of camp.
No, that's exactly right. Go ahead.
I'm trying a new thing this year with Remind, where I got all their cell phone numbers entered, and I'm sending text messages like every 2 weeks or so, either doing a countdown to camp or saying, hey, I'm sending you the schedule, look for it in your mail. Just the ones who don't open it or don't respond, then I'm calling them. I'm trying to make sure that they're actually speaking to me every few weeks up until we get there, so that they don't feel as able to take off.
That's really smart.
So you're definitely paying notice, Sam, of who's engaging and who's not, and so those people who may be on the fringes and aren't responding to your call to action, then you are reaching out to them, which I think is great, because then you're showing them that you are invested in them. And I think different ways that you can hold those having that engagement throughout the year. One thing that I know camps do is they have sort of regular Zoom meetings. And so using this very platform that we're using right now, and they'll have like once a month Zoom meetings for staff. And they might have them multiple times just to sort of hit different people and their availability. But if you think about the year and maybe what would resonate with them depending on where you are in the camp season. So for example, like right after the summer, one thing you could have a Zoom meeting on would be to share feedback from the summer, like all those great things that you heard from parents in their evaluations or their emails to you or their phone calls to you, or just their personal things that they told you when they came and, picked up their kid at the last day of the session that they were a part of. You can also have an alumni panel on your Zoom calls. And so invite some alumni from camp who have actually worked at camp, who can then share the benefits of working at camp and how that plays into their career or their current job or just life in general. And then I like to have the returning staff, I like to challenge them to think of ways of how we should welcome the new staff. What does that look like? How can you be part of that? What can we do to really reach out to these folks and make them feel part of our community? And it's empowering them to do that, I think, gives them that sort of, also they have some buy-in, because then if they're part of the welcoming, then they have to also be there to help do that.
Hey,
so
Kim,
yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I do work with camps on keeping families engaged throughout the other, 10 months of the year, 11 months of the year. And this is something that works well with families. And I wonder what you think with young adults who are going to be staff. What about having one of those monthly check-ins be about something that's not actually camp related, but is solving a pain point, like how to keep yourself healthy during finals, or how to, if you're in an area that has a lot of cold weather, that is how to stay fit when, and see if you can get an expert from your camp community, or, your camp nurse, if you have one, or someone else who's a camp person, so that they're a familiar face, but that they're actually not giving or getting information that makes camp run more smoothly. You're showing your investment in those people by giving or getting information that makes their lives better.
No, I think that's great. I think any way we can reach out and be a resource, or just show staff that we are invested in them and their own personal development, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. So
one of the things we know about millennials and Gen Z is that they don't make a distinction between personal and professional development. It's just development.
Right.
And so investment in me is investment in me.
Exactly.
That's a great point. That's an awesome point. And something that we're touching on a little bit with the Zoom calls is, I was joking around with Deb when she was showing me this thing she's about to roll out. She'll talk about later, how she's going to do some things in video, and some things with MP3, and some things with email, and some things with handouts, right? And I think that a lot of camp directors are baby boomers, right, or Generation X people, and they are so like, oh, they're so happy that email exists. And they're just, I'm just going to keep on sending more emails, but I email them every week or every 2 months.
They read it?
Right. And it's like they're delusional. And so I think that's part of the issue, that a lot of these, Gen X baby boomer kind of people, they're not seeing it from the eyes of these young people. And they're not going to read these long emails. Right. And posting a 1.5-minute video could be a lot more effective than a thought out, email that took you 3 hours to write,
No, I totally agree. And actually there's an app that I like to use, thanks to Travis Allison. He first introduced me to Bonjoro, and I think that's a fun way that you can reach out to staff. And so it's just, you record yourself, and then you make each message personalized to the particular staff. So you can say, hey, Andy, I'm so glad that you're going to be on board for this summer. If it's a new staff member, let them know how excited you are to have them on your team. Or if it's a returning staff member, glad to have you back, those kinds of things. And then I'm sort of envisioning between now, if you were doing this between now and the start of the summer, you could mention those things, like Deb, like you were mentioning, like finals, I know you have finals coming up. We're just letting you know we're thinking about you through your final exams, and you kind of letting them know that you have a sort of a pulse on maybe kind of where they might be in their year before they get to camp. So, but it comes as a video. You do email it, but I will say that in my experience for doing this with staff that I've been connected with, they see a video in their email, they will open it, or they'll have a higher chance of opening it. So, or just using FaceTime, or doing a video and recording it and then sending it to them. Yeah.
Send a Snapchat. Have one of your returning staff show you how. It's not hard once they show you. It's just a little weird until they do.
Right. And there was the great idea that someone mentioned about, that Kim mentioned about suggesting to the returning staff of how to welcome the new staff, of ways to involve the returning staff, right? Get them now that finals are approaching, right? Start talking about like, what would they want to help present during staff orientation and things like that, so that they have a little bit of skin in the game, and you're empowering them somehow. I think those are easy things, but there's so many camps now that have large full-time or part-time staffs, and they just handle it all themselves, and they think it's more efficient that way. But by the lack of empowerment that we're giving the staff, then I think that's just creating more of a vortex of, you know, of a void of commitment, right?
Most definitely.
I agree.
This year I have a lot of returning staff, so they're going to have a much bigger role in training than myself or any of my senior staff. We're trying to try a new thing and get the returning staff to be a lot more involved and play different roles.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that something that we've done is, you know, we've had staff act as ambassadors and and people who are on campuses, you know, in different towns around around where our campus. We have people who are recruiting on our behalf and who are there to welcome those people and to maintain that connection more. We're not doing it in a formal way necessarily at this point, but just having those people to maintain a connection and knowing that those new staff have somebody, a familiar face that they're going to see at at their first day of pre-camp, I think goes a long way to making them feel comfortable starting in a new environment for the first time. So it's something that we're working more on formalizing, I guess, as time goes on.
Yeah, last year at Liberty Lake, we did some formalizing similarly in having days, could be on a weekend or on a weekday night, for new staff to come. And we called it, I don't even remember what we called it, but we used the excuse that because they have so much paperwork to do and understanding, it was like a formalization of their working kind of thing. And they came out for an hour and a half. So let's say a dozen or so would come at a time, and they would speak to one of the directors for a while, who would explain some things to them, and they would go through the paperwork process to get that all done with for them. And it was just a nice touch point, and enabled them to meet some people and feel a little more comfortable with it. And even the people who were former campers got their first little insight in what it's like to have a real job. So that was good. I just wanted to mention that I have some friends at camps, at day camps, that are trying really hard to parse out all the little commitment things that staff need to do over the course of the off season. So creating a timeline from, let's say, the fall or even January through the first day of camp, so that instead of just sending the staff like, here is a boatload of things you need to sign and read and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, giving them one thing, this 1 month, and then giving them something else the next month and something else the next month. And not only that, but being really intentional about following up with them. If then they're not filling these things out or doing the things that they're being asked to do, almost for the sake of creating touch points within that for them, to show them how much we care and how much this is a real job and all that kind of thing. And then, of course, along the whole ride there of that, finding out along the way if somebody's really ghosting you at that point, in March or April, then you have a good sense that it's not going to be working out. That takes a lot of time and commitment. It takes somebody that's literally their job.
That's true. But we do know that we'll engage people better if we get them with 6 or 8 micro actions before we ask them for a big action. That's right. True for donations. That's true for parents signing up for camp. So if you can have a bunch of very small or easy or quick tasks, send us just snap a picture of your driver's license and send it to me right now. We need that for your file, right? Really breaking it up so that you have very small actions at first. Then when you send the bigger packet, it's more likely to get done.
I think that's sorry, I was going to say, I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's also, it takes that kind of a change, is a cultural thing also for the admin people at our camp, at our camps, because, the way that things have been done and the amount of work that the greater amount of work that's going to be involved with the many touch points and the many more, rather than one email with all the documents, having, 5 months of emails from the same number of people, it's going to be, a big change, but something that I think is necessary in the long term.
But I do like the idea, Andy, of combining those touch points of keeping people engaged, like Kim is describing, with getting some boxes checked. So, normally when I say, hey, you want to engage people during the year, then I would say, make sure that they snap a picture of themselves if they're wearing camp swag and post it and tag you on, because that's an easy thing to do, and tag you on social. But if they can just as easily take a picture of their driver's license and send you that, and you actually have something you need in addition, then I do love the idea of putting those two ideas together and keeping people engaged by getting things you need from them.
Right. Fun stuff.
I'm going to try a Kahoot challenge this year. So it'll just be like 10 questions. They can see on the screen where they stand with the rest of the challenge group, and you can send it out through Remind. So I haven't tried it yet, but that's what I'm going to try.
And awesome. I think you could use some camp knowledge. Like, we know that if you've assigned, for example, if you assign your staff to their units or their specialty areas, or if it's just by halves of camp, if you're still gender breaking down, then you could say, like, I'm just saying we've got 67% of the guys stuff in and 73% of the girls stuff in, or however you want to, of younger half of camp versus older half of camp. Then if you can have them encouraging each other for a little friendly competition, hashtag who's really the best, then you may get a little bit more engagement that way too. And it just adds that fun piece, especially as one of my kids pointed out to me when I was doing a staff training and my kids were along, and I broke everybody up into 3 groups for a scavenger hunt to find boundaries at camp. And they kind of did it, but they took off in a sort of lackadaisical way. And my 8-year-old said, "You didn't say there was a prize." And I was like, what? And he goes into the camp kitchen at Catalina Island Camp and comes back with a box of stale graham crackers and says, "Tell them there's a prize." And so I get on the megaphone and say, the winning team gets stale graham crackers. And these young adults took off like a shot for stale graham crackers. So if you say on the first morning of staff training, you get the first shot at the coffee pot, I think that'll be enough.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's also awesome you got to go to Catalina Island camps, because that place is like a bucket list.
Oh my gosh.
For me. Jeez.
Oh my gosh.
And I love the idea. I actually got that idea. I heard that idea from somebody presenting at Tri-State as well, just to, the non-cost, the no-cost prizes, just the idea of doing some whatever line bypass or first coffee pot or second cup of coffee, whatever it is, something that doesn't cost anything that anybody can really implement.
Yeah. First in line for dinner. That usually works for me at orientations. No doubt about it. So Kim, I'm curious, everybody talks about internships, right? And they're not so easy to make happen because, so you're talking now to a kid that's a freshman or sophomore in college, and they're concerned about coming back because they're told they need to get an internship or whatever. The parents are pushing them. And I'm sitting here like, hey, I'm happy to do an internship. I'll construct an internship over anything. If you're an accounting major, a marketing major, like landscaping major, whatever it is, I will make it work. But then I'm throwing it back into their hands. And then rarely is that kid motivated enough or has the time enough to actually facilitate it with their school. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it could be, they selling it to their school may be a challenge. That camp, the whole idea, again, camp is a real job. They might not see that. And so, but I think we have to try to hit the easy button if we can for staff. And so how to do this. And so maybe it's breaking it up into some of those micro steps like Debbie was mentioning earlier, that we could, help them with that process so that they, first have to get buy-in from their school, and they have to, do this and that kind of thing. I always like to ask staff, tell me what is it that what kind of skills are you hoping to gain in your internship? Like, what are you hoping to develop or grow? What does that look like? And then really sitting down with them and helping carve out what that internship might look like for them. And also remembering that internships are a pretty long commitment. Typically an internship is like a 10-week kind of thing, and they may have to do other things besides just the main thing that's part of their internship. They may have to, do some shadowing of other people. That's part of think you've mentioned, Andy, before that you're basically the mayor of a small town, right? Or so there's all kinds of things that they could get exposure to and experience with. So maybe they don't know that, and so helping sort of connect the dots for them on some of that. And then also maybe we also have to remember that if they're getting credit for an internship, they're also paying for that. And so that could be a huge chunk of change that they're being asked to. So they're working to do this internship, but they're also having to pay for the credit that will get them for that in their college institution or academic institution. So sometimes it could be that maybe what could be helpful for them, especially if they're not quite juniors and seniors in college, it may be a practicum, or it could be an independent study too. So there's like different levels of the amount of hours that are required and the amount of time that's required. So it may be also, being aware of that and suggesting those as possibilities.
Yeah, it's all good thoughts. And if you can make it happen, it's great. And yeah, they do have to pay if they're getting credits, but generally what I've found, it's credits that they would have needed anyway. And that,
right.
Generally they're not the ones paying for it. And then that's fine. I'll tell you that the local colleges around here in New Jersey, they won't even accept an internship like listing or anything like that unless you're paying minimum wage. That they're really hardcore about that, which I think is interesting. It's surprising to some people. They don't realize that. A lot of camps when they decide to go down that internship avenue. Also on your list, Kim, that you outlined from the last podcast we had, you had showing an investment in staff, which is similar to what Deb was saying about the pain points, and there's been lots of great stuff from ACA about resume stuff and the leadership development that we provide. You want to touch on that and some of like the resources that they've been putting together?
Sure. So I think it's just that whole idea of, we're asking staff to be committed to us, but we can show that we can reciprocate that in ways where we can show them our investment in them by their personal/professional development. And so ACA has done a great job of putting some handouts together on how do you translate those skills that you're learning at camp? What does that look like on a resume? But even better, if you're helping them do that at camp, like you're carving out some time, whether it's on a staff meeting, ideally, I think it's ongoing. Like you have these conversations where they might, share a time that they've practiced communication or they've practiced creativity or developed their leadership or critical thinking, all those kind of words that we typically, would be found on a resume. I know Jen Selke out on the West Coast, our friend on the West Coast, she not only holds a resume workshop for her staff, but she also helps them create their LinkedIn profile while they're at camp.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'd like to actually add to that I know that this feels like something to add to your to-do list, but a great way to get it off your to-do list and still get it done is to ask your staff, each staff member, to do a self-assessment. I've been doing some work with, actually, when I spoke at Tri-State about leadership development on the job at camp, I say every time you can, ask the staff person, what are some skills you want to develop this summer? What's something you would like to get better at? How are you, what are your own metrics for success this summer? And then when you meet with them, you can say, how have you moved the ball down the field yourself, so that they're the one handing you the things they want to get better at, giving you, and then you can just improve their language, make it more obvious.
I think that's super. And I do that at my camp, but I do it on the first day or second day of orientation. I'm thinking maybe that should happen well before that, because there's some people that are not making it to that point. And that if I showed them that I really cared about that thing earlier, maybe that would be helpful. So that's great. Great suggestion.
It could even be a part of the application process for, for a job at your camp, finding out that information so that you have a way to sell camp to the staff member when they come in.
Yeah.
One thing, even in the interview, you can start with the caring. We have one question that says, tell us about something you're proud of from this past year. And that kind of gets them talking about, they really are shocked that you're asking. And it gets them talking about things that not only show us who they are, but they feel good about getting to expound.
That's great. so be, when we were doing it actually just got posted yesterday, the second half of our tri-state interviews. And I was listening to the first one, and one of the issues that just keeps coming up when you just ask people broadly, hey, what's your biggest, issues kind of thing, is people keep talking about staff anxiety, which relates to camper anxiety and anxiety, blah, 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 as we all keep hearing. But I never really saw that as any kind of link to this staffing equation about getting people to show up on the first day until I was talking to Dr. G about it. And we're going to be having Bob Ditter on a podcast soon. Sam worked out. So, and that's going to be like the topic of the whole podcast. But in talking to Debbie Gilboa about it, she has brought up some really good points about how a lot of the kids that we hire are like overachiever kids. And, it was mentioned earlier in this podcast about some of these kids have second jobs and that kind of thing. Some of them are taking summer classes, and they're coming off of finals where they just like basically, didn't sleep for a week and all that kind of thing. And then, hey, it's staff orientation. It's time to grind you down in the heat, in 100-degree heat. So I'm handing it off to you, Deb.
I think that because we really want to focus in this conversation from interview to showing up, and I'll include showing up for the first day of campers, not just the first day of staff orientation.
Yeah.
But in that window of time, I think to a point that you were making, Kim, a lot changes in a day or two for students this age, not just over the course of months. And where I'm at when I interviewed, when I saw you in February, or when I saw you over winter break, Andy, at the ice cream shop, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally interested. That's right. I'm old enough to, to work at your camp this summer. How do I get an interview? And that felt really good because you wanted me, and it feels good to be wanted. And then maybe we had an interview in February or March, and it still seemed to me like the right thing. The number of things that might change or evolve in me and for me in the course of the next 3.5 months are epic. It's incredibly difficult. And the idea of working at camp sounded more exciting than what my mom would call nervous making when we talked at the interview. But the closer I get to actually thinking about having kids my little brother's age who are all looking at me, or the fact that my grandpa just offhandedly said, oh, we're going to have the wettest summer on record. The Farmer's Almanac said it's going to rain every day. Or, who knows what the thing is that's going to make me feel like I'm not equal to the task. Not even necessarily the issue of maybe a better offer will come along, but like right now, Andy, you like me. And if you see how I actually do this job, you might not like me anymore. I might not be as good at this. I have imposter syndrome. You think I'm really fun and really smart. You said those things, but I know I'm not that fun and I'm not that smart, and kids don't always like me. So what if I'm bad at this? And I think that one of the things we have to address are, and I don't mean this word in the clinical sense as an anxiety disorder, I mean it as a noun. We have to address incoming staff's anxieties about the work they're going to need to do, about the other things, as you mentioned, that they're balancing it with. Maybe I do have to take an online class, and I'm hoping to fit that into my evenings and my weekends and July 4th. That's a thing. Erin, I should say July 1st for you guys. So when I said, so we have to really consider what are the competing emotional poles, not just what are the other better or shinier, like an internship option. And so I think that a couple of really important things to address are to, at the interview, we're used to an interview maybe asking, for example, what are your strengths? What are your challenges? But what about asking, if I offer you this job as I'm hoping to, and you accept this job as I'm hoping you will, what will you be most nervous about on the first day? Or what do you think would be the hardest thing about doing this job for you? So that we can start to understand what some of those obstacles are per person. One of the things that you and I have talked about, Andy, is that great inventory you have for getting to know people. But I think that we need, because obviously we need to know our staff really well by the time they get to us, and we're trying to supervise them and guide them and encourage them and support them and give them feedback. But what about those intervening 3.5 months? If somebody reaches out to you and says, or if you get the sense because they're no longer returning your text, Sam, or they're no longer hitting all of those micro actions that you guys have for them, Erin, that maybe they're starting to consider ghosting, How do they want to be drawn back? What motivates them? What entices them? What stresses them? And we're going to stress people. Camp is meant to stress people. When I'm working with camps, as I often do, about their sign up to show up drop off rate for families, kids and parents who are excited to do this and then don't come or ask for their money back, I say, I want you to use when, not if language with families. I want you to say to parents, when, not if. When your child comes to you and says, I'm not sure about camp, here are some of the things you can say. When your sister-in-law says, I can't believe you'd send your kids to camp every day like they're in school, here are some things you can say. Then the family thinks, oh my gosh, my camp director is brilliant. They knew this would happen. So if you say to staff, when you start to question if this is the right job for you this summer, then when they question it, if they do, and some of them won't, and if they don't, they just feel braggy. They just feel like, you didn't know how committed I am. I'm a rock star. They don't think, you don't really know me. Maybe I shouldn't work there. But when they do question it, then they go, oh wait, they told me this would happen. This is a normal thing. Everybody goes through this. What did they tell me to do when this happened? That's better, because then you're getting through to resilience. You're getting through to the solution after that feeling, as opposed to focusing on like, wait, I'm not sure I should do this, so obviously I shouldn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that most camp directors and people that do interviews and such like that, I think that we veer away from the negative perception kind of things in worry that we're going to scare people away. And we do play devil's advocate sometimes with people that we're really confident with, and sort of try to draw a really realistic picture for them. But but I think few and far between. I think that we tend to err on the side of caution, and I think that's a great point. And I also think that there is a population out there that wants a challenge and wants to know the reality of a situation, because they want to sort of be up for the challenge.
And I would encourage you to also ask, what do you think is going to be great about it that I can remind you of when you're really focused on the things that are going to be hard? So I don't want us to only ask the challenging questions, but I mean, it's a little bit like a first date. Of course we want to put on our best face, but if you really hate vegetables and you choke them down at the first date, you're setting up unrealistic expectations. If you say, of course I love opera, and then they ask you to go to an opera, you're stuck. So you might as well be who you really are. And I think that because camps are such amazing opportunities for first jobs, second jobs, summer jobs, to teach, as Kim was talking about, to give great skills, to build amazing resumes, we don't have to pretend to be different than we are, because then we really are to blame when we get the wrong match with staff.
Mm-hmm. I went to one of your sessions at ACA National, and you said something that has resonated with me ever since. You were talking about the stress and anxiety that comes with, undertaking such a real job that this is. And you said how, discomfort is actually, could be a good thing. And that we live in a society now where people sort of take discomfort as a negative, as, oh, this is bad. I'm feeling this way. Like, I don't feel safe, kind of vibe. And meanwhile, we've created these situations in camp where we're constantly creating discomfort situations for them to grow.
Yeah, what's great about camp is everything that's great about camp comes from making kids uncomfortable, except reunions. So, right, reunion is all about comfort and reconnecting, but everything else that builds amazing memories and skills and situations at camp is about getting people out of their comfort zone. And yet, we're talking to a group of students who don't question the idea that uncomfortable and unsafe are inherently the same thing. They're not. And I actually have an activity that I just designed today for staff trainings, where we get 2 teams of staff members to define separately at different ends of the room, uncomfortable and unsafe, come back together, present it, and then stretch them to figure out what situations in which we can make people uncomfortable at camp, and situations in which we could accidentally make people unsafe at camp, and figure out the differentiator, and then role play how you would explain that to a camper who's feeling uncomfortable, how you can have empathy for them while explaining to them how they are not unsafe, how they are still safe, even though they're uncomfortable. Because when they do that for campers, we hope they'll take those lessons and do it for themselves. We have this great opportunity. But you asked a really important question at the beginning. You said, how can parents let people do this, let their young adults bail on a situation? And I'll tell you, parents have a different stress now, and that is their concerns about their kids' mental health. Ehren said specifically, parents will call and say, this is not what my kid is doing this summer. They had a rough year. They need the summer to recuperate, to recover. I don't want them in a situation that will stress them, because they will be less resilient when they get time to start the school year rather than more. Now, that's a fundamental misconception. Coming to camp can be a time that, and usually is a time that builds resilience and helps people recuperate through real life interactions and oxytocin and dopamine and learning and stress and like great stress. But parents now feel like our kids are one wrong move away from becoming someone with crippling anxiety or self-harming behaviors or an addiction. We really are led by the media and by our communities and by some real statistics to fear that we are one step from that. And it's our job to make sure that whatever our kid is about to walk into, it's not, God forbid, the straw that breaks their back.
Right. The suicide rates, for goodness sake.
Are climbing.
Yeah.
And we don't know what we don't know about what our kids are going through and where they're at. So Ehren, you're absolutely right to be, I kind of hope you're frustrated as a camp with parents who call and say, no, this is too hard for my baby. They need to be protected and comforted this summer. But we also have an obligation to change our perception problem that all stress is bad for people. Because you heard me say, Andy, that stress is to resilience as exercise is to muscle and fitness, physical fitness. So yes, it is possible to have so much exercise that you're in danger. If I went out and tried to run a marathon, I could die. I am absolutely not in good enough shape to do that right now. But if I want to get physically stronger, everybody listening would agree, I got to get out there and exercise some. If I want to be more resilient, I can absolutely be overwhelmed by too much traumatic stress. But the only way I'll become more resilient is by facing and managing and handling some stress in an environment with youth development professionals around me, watching me, supporting me, managing and supervising me. There couldn't be a better place.
It sounds like this should be our cell. I mean, that's what it sounds like to our staff. I mean, when 55% of kids going off to college are graduating in 6 years, you know, and so many freshmen don't make it through that freshman year. I mean, it seems to me that like camp is an amazing like boot camp.
Yeah,
you know,
and I do think that day camp directors are understandably frustrated by having to think about marketing camp to staff parents. We want parents out of the equation by the time our campers become staff members. But I have to tell you that especially for day camp counselors, that is an unrealistic expectation. We have to include parents in the conversation. Our opportunity is to share a goal with them, which is that their kids learn how to manage a real job and manage it well. So we need to engage with parents about how parents can support us and their camper and their counselors in that mission. But we have to stop resenting the fact that parents are a part of the equation, because for a majority of our staff, they are and they will be.
Right. I think I'd spoken to you about the fact that LinkedIn has a bring your parents to work day now, that they've completely embraced the idea that you need to embrace the parents. And myself and many other day camps are now writing letters specifically to the parents of the high school and college kids to give them a sense of the expectations. And
some of those parents are older millennials. So like when I created those resources, I've created a video and a tip sheet that are better than email because they're not email.
Damn good point.
And I think delivering that the kind of messaging that you were just talking about, Deb, to to parents through a video or whatever, from the camp director is a great way to even get parents asking their kids why you haven't applied for a job at camp. Like if we can do a marketing campaign to parents, and just reach out, maybe we'll have an influx of staff applications.
And I would say that April is a great time to do that, because April is when students, in the upper years of high school and the early years of college, students are not yet necessarily thinking about their summer job, but parents have already panicked.
Right. Can we also ask the parents not to take them on vacation?
I
For a
do,
week or
yeah,
two?
absolutely. And that's one of the things that I really hit. I want, you got to encourage parents to partner with you and get their kids to treat this like a real job, the way they want them to treat every job they'll ever get, so that they can keep those jobs. And you do that by sharing a goal with the parents, saying, I want for your kid the same thing you want for your kid, which is to know how to become a great employee and eventually business owner, or top of the food chain. So we're going to do that by you figuring out how to transfer from being your kid's manager to just being your kid's mentor, but also encouraging them to show up for work. One of the things I think is really important is that parents of staff stop calling you when their counselor is sick.
Yeah.
Unless they're in the ER or admitted to the hospital, it should not be the parent making that phone call.
Right.
Yeah. I'm finding that in in reaching a conciliatory tone with the parents, that I've become a lot less vigilant in my thoughts in regards to like that kind of thing, because I'm just so used to it now at this point, and I'm trying to partner with them, because I do agree that the overarching idea is that we do all have the same goal for these kids. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I don't reprimand the parents as much as I used to, or in the same sort of harsh way. But I do try to get it in there that, we really need to empower the kids and all, to give that. But there was a period of time until recently, frankly, that, I'd practically hang up on these parents when they called me.
I totally get that. And I wish that we could, to an extent, but it is good for young adults that parents don't feel like there's a victory lap and it happens the day after high school graduation. So, and like, peace out, and I'll see you on Instagram and whatever. Like, it's good that parents want to stay engaged if they can figure out how to make that transition from manager to mentor. And that's a hard transition to make. There are no guideposts for parents. So I think we can have empathy for parents and encouragement and excitement and goal sharing while putting up some boundaries that we hold to. Unless your child is in the hospital, we won't take a call from a parent, because of what you and we are working to teach your young adult is a completely reasonable line in the sand to have, with empathy for the parent.
Yeah. I see the way that we talk to the parents of our campers, that we see ourselves as these, youth development experts, and we're constantly, speaking just for my camp, giving parents advice on how to do things and sort of modeling it for them and all that kind of thing. And we have to continue that for these high school and college kids. That has to be our mindset, that we're continuing that process. Yeah. We're still partnering with parents. I love that. And I don't think that's too many people thinking like that.
No, I think I agree with what you all have been saying. I think we really have to let parents know that we don't just stop caring about your child because now they're working for me. They're working for us. We are going to help them. We're still in the youth development business. They are still developing, and we're part of that development. And it's just going to look a little different now than it has when your child was a camper. So, and I think a good term I know sometimes parents get a bad rep for their, today, whether it's we've heard helicopter for previous generation, we've heard snowplow parent, but I've also heard co-pilot, which I think is the way to think of, our young people are always consulting with their parents to check in with them to sort of get their opinion. And so, how can we sort of embrace that? Because that's what we're dealing with today. So.
I love it. Is that yours, or did you get that from someone?
No. I got it from Gen Z, the book Gen Z Goes to College. And I'm not going to be able to come up with the authors' names off the top of my head, but that was the term that they used. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great metaphor. I love it. All right. I think this has been a great fleshing of this topic. I am so glad that you guys came out and helped us out with this. I am sure that our colleagues, our day camp colleagues listening to this, if you're driving in a car, they're going to be playing it back where they can actually be taking notes, because I have a full page of notes myself.
Me too.
You guys, it's really spectacular. A whole lot of tools that could be put to use immediately, real practical stuff. Any last thoughts, Kim or Deb? Well, how about this? Kim, why don't you tell us about, how people can reach you and all that kind of thing and what you're doing between now and the summer. And if you have any last thoughts on this, and then we'll do that.
Sure. So conference season officially ended for me at Mid-State. So now I'm turning into staff training mode and getting ready to work with some camps for doing staff training starting the middle of May through pretty much the summer. So you can get a hold of me at kimaycock.com. And I'd love to partner with you in facilitating learning for your staff. So thanks so much for having me, Andy.
Oh, it's a pleasure. What kind of topics do you generally do at staff training for camps?
All kinds of things, like how to work with your co-counselor, how to sort of go through a typical camp day and being intentional, not leaving it up to chance, but making really great choices, communication, just lots of things. So,
Gotcha. Soup to
yeah.
nuts. All right,
Yep.
KimAycock.com. Awesome. All right, Dr. G.
Kim is coming out to Illinois May 31st to do a workshop from 9 to noon at Bartlett Park District, if anyone wants to join us.
Where's the workshop at? You broke up a little there.
Sorry, it's in Bartlett Park District in Bartlett, Illinois, around Chicago. And it's May 31st. It's for frontline staff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Sure.
All right. Dr. G.
Hey, so I do camp trainings, but actually the thing that I am most focused on for April and May is helping camps reach families and reach staff to avoid that sign up to show up drop off that we were talking about, and to be ready to prepare our staff to have better mental health this summer at each level, frontline and supervisors and leadership. So I've developed a bundle, Dr. G's prescription for preventing stressed out staff. And I also have some resources that can go straight to families about how to use day camp really well and how to handle morning routines for day camp parents, how to have the conversation with them about, wait a minute, my child didn't want to go, or knowing when to call camp and when you don't need to, and some other resources that I believe really proved out last year to make day camp staff and leadership's lives a little easier and make parents feel more supported and more engaged. So the best way to get in touch with me is my website, which is askdrg.com.
And they can find that stuff like through the resources?
So there are ways to find it on there, but really the easiest thing rather than navigating is to just shoot me a quick email and I'll help you figure out if any of it and what makes sense for your camp and how to brand it as your camp so that when families see it, it's coming straight from you.
All right, so you can always look up Debbie Gilboa, just Google her and you'll find her too. But we're gonna have the contact information for Debbie and for Kim on our show notes. So you can just refer to that at daycamppodcast.com. So before we close out, I just want to say that the Day Camp Podcast is also brought to you in part by our friends at AM Skyer, the leading insurance broker for the finest camps in America. For almost 100 years, AM Skyer has been a strategic partner with summer camps, ready to support any needs arising in PR, legal issues, health, facility, and more. Check out the AM Skyer difference. So I want to thank our executive producer, the Camp Maverick himself, Mr. Go Camp Pro, Travis Allison, helping us get this show out to you, and his producer, Matt, who does all the technical stuff in the back. And, thank you again to Debbie Gilboa and Kim Aycock, and to our generous sponsors, ACA New York, New Jersey, Commercial Recreation Specialists, and AM Skyer for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. So check out the show notes, like I said, on daycamppodcast.com. Feel free to send us some feedback. And by the way, I saw the statistics for our amazing Day Camp podcast, and we've been downloaded thousands of times in 17 countries and all that kind of stuff. But did you know we only have 6 reviews? 6 reviews. By the way, they're all 5 stars. They're all 5 stars because I don't sit here and say, come on, give me a review. But, let's get some other people besides Aaron's mom, some reviews.
He only has 6 computers, so that's the limit.
That's it. We're out.
So,
can you review it anywhere if you're not a Mac person? Like if you can't review it on iTunes, where can you review it?
Oh gosh, Aaron, any feedback on that?
Good question.
Millennial question. Hold on.
Yeah, I think we need to. We'll put I think some links in to where you can review it. And I mean, as a Mac, as a PC user, you can still use the iTunes store if you have iTunes downloaded on your computer. If you don't, then I'm sure there's the yeah, we'll put the link in so you guys can figure it out.
Hit the easy button.
Yeah, but
Awesome.
thank you for those reviews in advance. We appreciate it.
Matt Hansberger, if you could hook us up with that information, something tells me you know about that, that would be great. So we'll be back real soon. The next podcast is going to be staff training with our buddy, Professor Dave. And then, like I said, we're going to have Bob Ditter. And then, my gosh, the summer's right around the corner. So enjoy the spring, the flowers, the allergies, and thanks for listening. This has been the Day Camp Podcast.